Hello and welcome back to the Property Trio, the podcast for the sophisticated property buyer. I'm Cate Bakos and I'm joined by my co-hosts Dave and Mike. Today we're diving into a fantastic listener question from Greg, who's been catching up and listening to all of our original EPs, and it sparked a really important discussion for him. Greg was listening to our episode 339 on mortgage myths, and he picked up on something Dave mentioned a few times, which is the cost of changing lenders. Greg's question is, how do you weigh up the savings versus the costs of switching lenders, assuming it still fits within your strategy, of course? And what costs should people actually be thinking about? There could be break fees with the old bank, establishment costs with the new bank, etc. But does stamp duty get charged again on the new loan? I love that Greg's come to us with this question, but I also love that he's a seasoned listener and was quoting an ep, quite a few months back. It's wonderful when they reach out like this, isn't it, guys? So Dave, as our resident mortgage strategist, I'll start with you. When someone's considering refinancing, what's the right way to think about this?
Yeah, so look, it's a great question from Greg, and I'm actually a little surprised I hadn't thought to do this topic in our first 360 or so episodes on refinancing. So look, the big mistake we see every day is that people focus purely on the rate instead of the total benefit across various strategic areas. But in today's episode, we'll certainly cover the exit costs, the setup fees, and then some of the strategy beyond just weighing up the benefit of an improved interest rate. So just high level to give our listeners a bit of an insight into what are some of those strategic benefits you can access when you refinance. They include enhanced tax deductions, improved risk management via increased buffers or reduced loan repayments. So that feeds into, certainly you can improve your cash flow with the refinance, and that's not just from the interest rate, but that also can be from adjusting your repayment strategy, increasing the loan term back out to 30 years where it will have reduced, let's say you've had the loan for 3 years down to 27 years. So therefore your P&I repayment would be higher. Optimizing the use of offset accounts that you may not be doing currently. You can look to set up a money management system across multiple offset accounts if you don't have one in place already. And certainly something that's coming back in for everyone out there to consider who has a mortgage is they may find themselves locked into the mortgage prison, which was spoken a lot about when rates were rising out the back end of COVID, where they may actually be unable to refinance because of tighter borrowing capacity, which would mean they no longer have that capacity to actually leave their existing lender because everyone's borrowing capacity is reducing at the moment after the last 50 basis points rate rise. So beyond the strategic changes I just outlined, which we'll come to in the later part of the episode, we will go through those nuts and bolts of how much you'll save on the new loan versus how much it costs you to switch. And if the savings clearly outweigh the costs over, let's say, the first 2 to 3 years or maybe as long as 5 years, then it should make sense to refinance. But if it's marginal, that's where you need to become more considered about what you're getting.
Yeah, well said. And what are the actual costs that people should be thinking about in this instance, Dave? Because I think there's a bit of confusion out there.
Yeah, look, this is a good place to start. So we can get to the strategy side of things later, but the break costs, really, we break it down into two buckets. Bucket one constitutes the costs of leaving your current lender. All right, so basically, one key cost can be breaking fixed rates. That's a big one to watch out for. If you're on a fixed rate and you're refinancing before that fixed rate term finishes, then there could be a break cost, and that can be significant depending on two factors. One, how much time is remaining on your fixed term and the gap between your fixed rate and the current market rates. That is when your fixed rate is higher than the current variable rates, because let's face it, it's unlikely you'll want to refinance if you're on a really low rate fixed rate, which is lower than the rates available in today's market. So let's break this down a little further, and I'll hand you over to Mike to wax lyrical here because I've done enough talking for now.
Right, I don't know how lyrical I'll be, Dave, but I've been drafting off you this whole spring classic season. I'm about to pop out into the wind and start my own mortgage business with all this insight I've had by joining you with these. But this is
Good
a
to hear.
great question.
I've loved having you as my wingman for these mortgage episodes.
Thanks, mate. So let's get into the nuts and bolts. So, for example, if you have 2 years remaining on your fixed term, the break cost will generally be higher than if there's only 1 year left, assuming the fixed rates are the same and both sit above the current variable rate. So one key factor on the break cost is basically summed up in this way. The longer you have to run on the fixed rate, the greater the cost. The other key factor is if your fixed rate is well above current variable rates, the bank is effectively losing money when you exit early, and the banks we often refer to as the fun police. So they're going to want
and fear them, or you sort of half re-fear them. we sometimes
it's deliciously Freudian, isn't it? Or at least a malapropism. Gosh, we're getting into semantics here.
Malapropism. You might have to tell our listeners what that word means, Mike.
Well, it's a misuse of words.
Right.
Comes from,
okay.
I think, Mrs. Malaprop, but we're
something we're all very skilled at.
Yeah, that is true. But we are losing listeners at a rate of knots here, Dave. So I'll stay on the straight.
They like a little bit of banter and laughter, Mike. Make no mistake about that. Yes,
I haven't.
As long as it's not too ridiculous.
Of course, those banks, they're going to want to recoup that cost through a higher break cost. So we can sum it up in the sense that the higher the fixed rate above the current variable rates, the more you will pay to exit.
Yeah, that's right, Mike. You really know your stuff in this mortgage space. Thank you. So it is assessed on a case-by-case basis. So, yeah, if you're on a fixed rate loan, it's always important to check the break cost with your lender before you make any decisions. So this is known as the economic cost. And look at Property Planning Australia. Our team will take care of crunching these numbers for you, including mapping out all the fees and showing clients their real net position before they make a move.
I love these things the banks like to use, the economic cost to the lender. It's like when the RBA cut rates, the banks are like, oh, we're not going to give you that, or we're going to give you a little bit because the cost of funding, this mysterious cost of funding, means that they can't be nice and give us those cuts. But yeah, as I understand it, you've also got smaller exit costs like discharge and admin fees, which are, I think, around $350 per property. Sometimes it can be $100 to $200 per loan, depending on the lender. So, for example, if you've got 3 loans secured against one property, depending on how the lender charges, you might pay $350 in total if it's per property, or 3 loans by $200 would be $600 in total if fees are charged per loan. But generally speaking, the more properties or separate loan splits you have, the more those fees start to stack up.
Yeah, 100% right, Mike. The general rule is, as you just sort of touched on, the bigger your portfolio of properties or loans, the higher the cost to refinance. So those are the exit costs, either fixed rates, the economic cost of getting out of a high fixed rate onto a lower rate, and the discharge of your mortgages or loans. So ballpark for our listeners out there, if you have one loan in place currently and you're considering refinancing, you're probably looking at about $300 to $500 with the discharge of mortgages or loans. That's separate from if you've got a fixed rate economic cost, which most people don't. If you have 2 properties or loans, you may be looking at $400 to $700. And if you have 3, you may be looking at $600 to $1,050, and so on. So most people fit into the bracket of 1 to 3 properties or loans, so that most of our listeners will be able to work out which price point exit cost they sit in.
All of this stuff is PTSD for me. I remember when I got divorced many, many, many years ago. More than 25 years ago. No, it was about that. And we had fixed and we had like clever splits. And, you can be really clever with all this stuff. But when you're exiting a fixed loan with splits, it's not a cheap exit, and it compounds things when you're going through a breakup. It was not so great, but it's good to hear you discussing it and explaining it so that our listeners can have a really clear view of, what happens when you want to leave your existing lender if you've got these things in place. Now, Dave, what about
your
this
existing spouse
as
well?
I just remember asking Pete Kalezos once, Pete, if you just had to sum it up in one short sentence, what's the secret to building wealth effectively? I was expecting him to come out with, some really cool economic phrase, and he just said to me, stay married.
Yeah.
That was it. Anyway, I digress.
Hard to dispute that one.
Oh, yeah.
He's not the first man to say that.
No, well, it's very true. What about the second bucket of costs that borrowers need to weigh up, Dave?
All right. So the second set of costs that you have relate to the cost of setting up the new loan. So we've just covered off what it's going to cost to say goodbye to that old partner lender who you're with. And so the new lender now we're getting to know. And the setup fees with the new lender are usually known as an application or package fee. And that's the fees you'll pay the lender, and then you'll have some settlement fees that you'll pay the state government to register your new mortgage. So with the lender, you're generally looking at an application or package fees that typically range between $150 to $400 package fees with most lenders. The packages or fees generally remain the same irrespective of how many loans or properties you have if you're going with a mainstream lender. Whereas the settlement fees are government costs, and they're generally known as mortgage registration title fees. They are state-based fees, and they'll usually range between $120 to $240. And you'll pay that twice because you are paying to discharge the mortgage with your existing lender and then register the mortgage with the new one. So they find a way to sting you, don't they? The governments, which way possible. So you may also have valuation fees, which are another consideration, but they are often waived nowadays. It really depends on the lender, the loan product, your property type. But these will generally be absorbed within the package fee. But if you do have valuation fees charged, which should be advised to you in advance by your strategic mortgage broker or lender, they'll normally be around $250 to $450, depending on the valuation type and the lender. And we'll just be mindful that we are talking about residential loans throughout this episode.
Yes. Thanks, Dave. Okay, so we're building a picture of the setup costs. And if I come back to another part of Greg's question, does stamp duty get charged again on the new loan?
As at the time of recording, I mean, we haven't had the May budget. I think it's going to be a hell of a night. You never know what's going to happen there. But right at the moment, no, you don't pay stamp duty when you refinance because it's a government charge that only applies when you purchase a property or transfer ownership. And with a refinance, the ownership's going to stay the same. So you're just changing the lender.
Yeah, it's an important point, Mike. I remember when I was mortgage broking way back in June 2004, just actually the month before I started Property Planning Australia, July 2004, and Victoria had just abolished mortgage stamp duty. So you used to pay stamp duty on your mortgage.
Don't give
in
them
most
ideas,
states.
Dave. Don't give them ideas.
Yeah, that's true.
It was way less though, wasn't it?
Oh, it was way less. It was like a few hundred or a few $100 base plus I remember it was $4 for every 1,000 you borrowed.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that stacked up nowadays with much bigger loans. It didn't seem as much back then, but yeah.
I don't reckon they're going to go into the election with that promise, Mike. That's on the nose.
Which
it's not going to win. there's no party that would go in with the let's charge stamp duty on
Mortgage
mortgages.
stamp duty.
No, I don't think so. But
Safe to assume that one's done.
Yeah.
It's a nervous time, and in the lead up to the budget, we're getting so many little things leaked and tested and comments made, and the Treasurer has said it's not the budget that we plan to have. We've been held hostage by oil prices and all that sort of stuff. So it makes me nervous.
Yeah, that's going to be the big reveal on budget night, that's for sure. Although usually a few things come out a couple of days before. All right, yeah. So yeah, Greg, we don't need to pay mortgage stamp duty anymore. Your stamp duty on your purchase, transfer of land is just a one-off. But what you might need to be mindful of, and our listeners need to be mindful of, particularly first home buyers who might have borrowed 95%, is if you're looking to refinance, you really will want to have your loan-to-value ratio below 80%. Otherwise, you would have to pay mortgage insurance for a second time, because the mortgage insurance you would have paid the first time only covers your existing lender. And the new lender would want you to pay that again, because guess what? It doesn't protect you, it protects the bank. So that is certainly something to be mindful of if you're around the 80% mark and understanding this.
Yes, the bank are going to try and charge whatever they can to protect themselves. So it means when you refinance, if your loan's still above 80%, the lender's effectively stepping into that risk position. So that's what they're looking at there. It means you could be up for LMI again, even though you've already paid it once. And that's why many borrowers who originally purchased above 80% will actually wait till their loan is reduced or seen enough growth so that the LVR is down below 80% to avoid that LMI a second time. So if you're worried about the LVR sitting around 80%, a good strategic mortgage broker like Dave can look into it and get a valuation completed in advance to ensure the equity is there, because often the LMI cost will outweigh the benefits of refinancing. We've talked about a few different costs. LMI is a significant one compared to some of the smaller fees we've talked about already.
Dave, I want to ask you about LMI, because there are situations that I've heard of where a client has got a credit back from that, or they've not had to pay the full amount. And not many brokers talk about that.
No, so like if you do leave the lender within, like it might be the first 12 months, or you can get a refund on your mortgage insurance premium, or if you pay the loan down to below 80% rapidly, you can get a refund on part of your mortgage insurance premium.
Yeah, it's nice to know, because it's nasty. Well, thank you. To sum up, you may have an application or package fee ranging from somewhere like $150 to $400, and a fee around $150 per property to register the new mortgage and discharge the old mortgage. So one property might be somewhere between $400 to $700, two properties, $700 to $1,000, and so on. So when you're assessing whether refinancing actually makes sense, what are some of the key considerations or nuances that people should be aware of on top of what we've already discussed regarding the costs?
Yeah, so this is something we spend a lot of time on with our clients because the detail here is what actually determines whether refinancing works or not. So first, you need a very clear understanding of those exit costs from your current lender and the setup costs with your new one. So a good broker should be laying all of that out clearly. This is something we do for every client, so there are no surprises. At the end of the day, you end up with two numbers. Let's say your cost to exit are 500 and your cost to set up the lending, let's say it's 500. So round it up to 1,000. So then secondly, you then obviously you look at the interest savings and across a time frame. So we'll generally look, I mean, if you're looking at a time frame of how much you're going to save over 30 years, it's pretty easy to make the refinance look worthwhile. But the reality is the average loan in Australia only lasts about 3.5 years. So, and we think people should review their loans every 2 to 3 years, and we'll certainly offer to do that for our clients that regularly. So we think it's only it's more appropriate and fair to actually look at how much of a benefit you're going to glean in the first 2 to 3 years generally, and make sure you're going to get your money back over that type of time frame, or maybe 5 years at max. So that's something for people to watch out for. Make sure they're getting their money back in those first few years, because the savings can look monumental if they're spread out over 30 years. So that's the lens you should be using with looking to refinance. So, for example, if you're saving $3,000 per year over 3 years, that's $9,000 in total. And in this case, I've said $1,000 to leave the existing lender and set up the new one. So that would be a saving of $8,000 in that example.
Yeah, I want to challenge this because people often don't put a value on their own time when they're property investors, whether it's being hands-on with, fixing something or doing a renovation yourself or switching lenders, because it takes hours to pull together all of the required documentation. And if you've got a big portfolio and you've had refinancing in the past and you've had equity releases, then it's a big spider web of notes. We've talked about that before. And I know if I said to my husband, let's refinance, I'd have to have a very, very good reason, because he would put his own time into the equation as well. He'd say, well, you're tying me up for 2 days to go through all of our documents and make sure everything's good to go to the broker. And I think we've always got to look through that lens as well. What is our hourly rate if we're not doing our day job?
Yeah, look, I think, the reality is the number of properties you guys own, you're like one in more than 1,000.
Yes.
So it is for 95 or 97 out of 100 people, they own 3 or less properties. So you do need to factor in the time, but really, your time shouldn't be more than 3 to 6 hours of your own personal time. Yeah,
it's good for people to understand how long it takes. So I think that's a very reliable time frame, because you've got to have the right documents. You can't say to the bank, oh, I couldn't find my rates notice, but this will do, or here's an old one. Then they're not that friendly.
There's 3 to 6 hours sort of sitting and sipping a glass of wine and maybe reading a P.G. Wodehouse or something. This is based on a true story. And then there's 3 to 6 hours of collecting documents. And I argue that one takes a lot longer than the other.
Yeah, look, the collecting documents isn't as difficult as it used to be, because most of it can be done automatically back end through software grabs and
Thank God for that.
And that's not the entire 3 hours. I mean, obviously you have a meeting, you're talking about some strategy, you're making decisions, you are finding some documents which everyone hates, but really that shouldn't take more than an hour in total, and hopefully less than half an hour, but it is very painful. There's signing some loan documents. No one loves to sign documents, let's face it. Or read them, and let's face it, most people don't read them. But the key, like for example, we with our service will provide the key information on the loan documents, so it's really easy for our customers to understand them. But look, you need to weigh that up. Obviously, the more properties and loans you have, it will be a bit more time consuming. But you've still got to consider what's your hourly rate. I mean, even if you save $8,000, and even if it took 8 hours, which I think could be the upper end for people with 5 or less properties, probably, or 6 or 7 less, that's $1,000 an hour. So it's not a bad earning rate.
I know he'd rather be on the boat with a fishing rod, but anyway. Money is money, and it's an economic conversation, isn't it? And that $3,000 a year example, 8,000 in 3 years is a real saving. So yeah, sometimes it's worth doing the sums and getting off our butt and getting those docs.
And we're talking about once every 2 to 3 or 4 years.
Yes.
As well.
So what are some other factors to consider outside of the simple exit and setup costs and the interest saving, Dave?
Yeah, look, a nuance people often miss is offset balances. So basically, you need to factor in the benefit less however much money you're going to have in your offset account when you're calculating the refinance benefits and savings. So we do come across people who've got big offset balances and they've been told they'll save this much from some other lender or broker, but it's not factoring in the money in their offset. The savings are actually less than what they've been advised. So you should ensure, and we'll certainly always ensure, that we're calculating the savings of the refinance, factoring in however much money they have in their offset account, because that can make a big difference if you've got $100,000, $200,000 or more sitting in an
Yeah.
offset account. Yeah, and look, I could use some numbers and examples here, but as long as people understand that primary concept, that is the main thing for our listeners. Because you just need to be careful that you're not working with someone who's accidentally excluding your offset savings when they're calculating the benefits for you.
Yeah, I think that's really critical. It'd be awful to see that go down the drain. So what about the cashback offers that we saw flying around during COVID times? And I've seen them at other times as well. You know, when banks are hungry for refinance customers, one thing that they'll offer that gets instant traction is cashbacks. Are they still around?
Yeah, they're not nowhere near as prevalent, but there are some cashback offers still available, and they're not as generous as they once were a couple of years ago as we came out the other side of COVID. But look, sometimes they can completely cover the cost of refinancing, or at least take a decent chunk out of it, which can tip the numbers in your favour, and mean you stomach that hour or 30 minutes of finding loan documents, scanning them, and emailing them over for the
Yes.
thousands of.
Triggering my PTSD, Dave. But if we can just put that to the side, because I'm convinced, almost convinced. If I can be sort of on $1,000 an hourly rate to do some of this stuff, then it makes sense. So if we bring it back to the basics, you've got to know your costs, you've got to calculate your realistic savings, including those offsets, which is a very key point we just touched on, and assess it over the right time frame, not 30 years like the loan time, let's say 2 to 3 years, because we've sort of shared today that that's more likely a loan term than 30 years when we factor in refinancing. And if we do have a cashback, we can add that into the equation, and then hopefully we land at a point where, okay, yep, this is painful as hell, but it's worth it.
Yeah, exactly. And when we settle your loan, we'll send you a bowl of red and a good book.
One before and one after, if you wouldn't mind.
Hilarious. Well, let's make this really practical for our listeners. How does an assessment typically look for a refinance, Dave?
Yeah, so this is exactly how we assess it with clients at Property Planning Australia. We just keep it simple and use the same example as below. So let's say you've got an $800,000 loan with $100,000 sitting in offset. So you're really paying interest on $700,000. A rate reduction of as tiny, it may sound, as 0.2%, that's an annual interest saving of $1,400. So over 2 years, that's going to save you $2,800, and over 3 years, that's $4,200. If we factor in the costs, $350 to exit the current lender, $395 is a common package fee with existing lenders. Government fees might be $135.80 in Victoria to discharge a mortgage, and the same to register a new mortgage. So let's call that about $1,000 in costs. That leaves a net benefit of $1,800 in 2 years, $3,200 over 3 years, $4,600 over 4 years for those of you who don't like to refinance too often, $6,000 over 5 years for those of you who really don't like to refinance, and so on. So there is an upside actually for those who don't like to refinance. There is more benefit to refinance because you don't have to do it. You don't do it as often. You get my logic there. So even if those savings may seem modest, it's still money that's better in your pocket than the bank's, especially when you're making these decisions consistently every 2, 3, or 5 years. Okay, and let's face it, if you're walking down the street and saw two to $3,000 on the footpath, you'd bend down to pick it up.
I guess you would. So that's the cost side of the equation. But now I want to zoom out a bit because this question is really timely as we head into potentially another rate decision from the Reserve Bank of Australia. Mike, why is refinancing something that people should be actively thinking about in this climate?
Yeah, well, to quote, I think maybe it was an 80s song, the only way is up, seemingly
Yes.
in the next little while. I don't know who that was.
Yeah, it was Yaz.
That's right, yeah.
Was it? There you go. So, yeah, I mean, this is where it gets interesting because we're not just talking about saving money anymore. It's about positioning yourself for future savings. So there's a few key things happening. First, of course, rates. The money markets are predicting a 72% chance that the RBA will deliver their third rate increase for 2026 at the upcoming meeting next month. And the big four banks are predicting that as well. Then it's looking like we'll have at least another rate increase after that. Let's hope not. But we are probably trending back to that long-term average, which we have to say, and I think Dave said it maybe last episode to alienate the millennial base, that you need to get used to it being higher. So even if we don't see aggressive hikes from here, we're still in a higher for longer environment. So if you're not refinancing because of one rate move, you're planning for the next 12 to 24 months. And these decisions will have an impact on your borrowing capacity, which is a key point for us to make here as well. Some people will not be able to refinance after one or two more rate rises, and that's the reality. Often when people refinance, they do so up at around their maximum borrowing capacity.
Yeah, and this is probably the biggest risk people don't fully appreciate, those with mortgages out there. Generally, they won't be thinking about this, that you might qualify to refinance today, but not in 6 or 12 months when rates have increased further. Some people will already be locked out, and they probably won't realise it after those first two rate increases. And as I touched on, I've already mentioned, that's where the concept of a mortgage prisoner comes in, which means you're stuck with your current lender. And that's not because you want to be, but because you no longer meet the criteria to move. We saw this a lot in 2024 with a lot of new leads and existing clients who left it too late. At that time, the cash rate hit 4.35 in November 23, and it stayed at that level until February 2025, when we had the first of 3 rate reductions. So there were many people who had options 1 year and suddenly didn't for over a year. They just had to stay where they were. And the reality is, with 2 rate rises in 2026 already on the books and for still to come, and the cash rate currently at 4.1%, we're only 1 rate rise away from being back in that environment again. Okay, so that's really important for people to understand. That's back at where we sat, the peak of the rates from November 23 to Feb 25. So this is a key point, and it's a real call to action for our listeners out there who are thinking they may want to have some spare cash, buffers, improve their rates and get their strategy and structure right. You're better to look at that now, because at some stage in the coming months or year, you may not be able to move at all.
That's a scary thought. And it does underpin the fact that this isn't just about chasing a better deal anymore, is it?
Yeah, no, not at all. This really is about risk management. And it's a conversation we're having with clients every day at Property Planning Australia right now. And if you're concerned about further rate increases, now would be the time to consider your options and restructure your debt and get in before the access to finance becomes more difficult. So I'll do a bit of a summary here. Refinancing can help you move to a lower monthly repayment to improve your cash flow, ensure that you're making the most of offset accounts and have an effective money management system, access equity to increase your cash buffer to manage risk, consolidate debt to make your repayments lower. Now could be the time to fix a portion of your debt. We're certainly seeing more people fixing currently. That's definitely a trend that's in place to buffer you against further rate increases. Review your loan type, whether it's variable, fixed, a split, etc. Fixing maybe some of your investment costs, so you just know they're locked in, your investment loans over a longer period of time, and hopefully your rents keep increasing that you're receiving. And a big one we haven't touched on is your repayment strategy. So are you paying principal and interest on your investment loans instead of preserving that debt and paying interest only to maximize your long-term deductibility? We see this all the time. And that also means you're missing the opportunity to direct surplus cash flow towards offsetting paying down your home loan, your non-deductible debt. Or you may have plans to upgrade down the track, or you may be a rent investor, and you could be building up more savings to go towards a future home. So there's all these strategic elements that we generally find people have little bits and pieces they're not getting right. And all of these points highlight why receiving strategic mortgage advice is so important, particularly if you want to ensure that you're optimizing your tax position and preserving your ability to hold and grow your property portfolio over the long term. In our experience, almost every investor with multiple properties has at least one hole in their loan structure that's costing them over time. And when you compound that over the years leading up to retirement, however long, so I think, what's your age today? How long is it going to be until you retire? Generally, that's a reasonable period of time that can be costing you money if you don't get it right today. So sure, part of the picture is what's a low rate, but just as much is, am I in the best possible position for what's coming strategically? And this is where having a well thought out mortgage strategy matters, and where it needs to align with your property plan. And most mortgage providers or brokers won't factor this in, unfortunately. It's not just about picking a cheaper rate, but it's also about structuring your lending so it actually supports your long-term plan.
Oh, well said. There's so many segments there that are really valuable to hear, Dave. Let's talk about fixed rates. If someone's considering fixing, whether their current lender or a new one is on the table for discussion, what should they be thinking about?
Yeah, so look, certainly we're seeing it at the coalface. Fixed rates are absolutely back in the conversation again. People are looking to shore up and get certainty. So the pros are pretty clear. Certainty of repayments, protection if rates rise further, peace of mind for some borrowers. So that is the pillow test is a key factor in your mortgages.
Yeah.
It's where your greatest risk is for most people. But there are trade-offs.
Yes, and I will be speaker one for the negative. We've got less flexibility, no offset account in a lot of cases, and we've done, it seems like 1,000 episodes on the advantages of offsets, limits on additional repayments and break costs if you exit early as well. And the big one is if rates stabilise or fall. We've certainly had a little bit of talk about stagflation, and we never know what's going to happen with the economy. You could actually be in a position where you end up paying more. So it's not always a free lunch.
That's right. No such thing as a free lunch. So I like to phrase it this way. Fixed rates aren't about beating the bank. They're about buying certainty. I mean, a fixed rate, you should think of it as an insurance product, really. And you tend to pay a bit of a premium for insurance, and you tend to for fixed rates as well. And if you lose on a fixed rate, generally that's good news because you'll have some debt on variable rates. So it means your variable rates are getting lower and rates overall are getting lower. So if you go in with that type of mindset, that even if you lose, you're winning, that's really the mindset to take in to when you lock in for a fixed rate.
I love this glass half full attitude you've got today, Dave. The renos must be going well despite your internet connections.
Yeah, well, we're getting close to getting to live in 2/3 of the house. So I think that's
is parting.
Yeah, that's quite exciting. So for a lot of people, a split loan can be a really good middle ground. You get some certainty with the fixed portion, but you still retain flexibility with the variable portion. Generally, we wouldn't recommend fixing all of your debt, particularly with the limitations around fixed rate loans, like we've talked about, not being able to link an offset account, limitations on repayments. If in terms of time frame, I generally prefer a time frame of at least 3 years, because often if you fix for 1 to 2 years, just as you're getting off the fixed rate, you actually would be due to be getting the benefit of it. And we saw that over the COVID period when banks, were pretty confident that, we're at the lowest rates of all time. So they're really flogging their key product was the 2-year fixed rate, which a lot of people got into. And obviously rates were on the way up as a lot of them were stepping out of it. So, yeah, I generally advocate 3 years or longer. And all this strategy is exactly the kind of work our team does, helping clients structure the right mix based on their goals and unique circumstances.
Dave, I've got a question about fixed, and particularly dating back to, when rates were at an all-time low and we knew that they couldn't get much lower. I mean, let's be realistic. If your cash rate's 0.1, there's not much more room to move. What were the longest fixed periods that you could cater for?
Yeah, I don't think you could fix for longer than 5 years.
We tried hard too. Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to fix for 100 years.
Well, I've seen many years ago, back in my broker days, which are like not even relevant anymore. It was, 20 years ago when I was a mortgage broker, and you could get a 10-year fixed if you tried.
Yeah, I think back there used to be 7-year and 10-year fixed rate terms.
Yeah.
Once upon a time. I'm not sure if anyone still provides for that. Yeah.
I wondered. And the challenge there is servicing, because if it's a 30-year loan term and you're wanting a 10-year fixed, then you need to demonstrate that you can service a 20-year variable because you've already lost your 10 years. The banks don't really calculate this refinancing caper when you're talking to them about a fixed rate. They will make sure that you can service the residual of the loan once you've fixed for a portion.
Yeah, if you've selected interest only.
Yes.
That's where it chews up your borrowing capacity, yeah.
Yeah.
On the reduced term.
All that bank talk, it's taken me back. It's been such a good ep, and thanks to you and your team, Dave, for all of the structuring, for answering this question. I think it's been done so well, and it's such a timely discussion. So let's wrap up by bringing it back to Greg's question. There are costs to switching lenders, but the bigger risk right now might be doing nothing and delaying taking action.
Yes, and that can be very costly. Paying a couple of $1,000s in costs is one thing, but being stuck in a loan that no longer suits you with no ability to move because you've left it late is a much bigger problem.
Yeah, agreed. And just remember, don't chase a headline rate. Look at the net benefit. Understand the strategy before the interest rate, and think about your position 2 to 3 years ahead. And Greg, thank you so much for your question, and for everyone who's listening. If you've got a scenario you'd like us to unpack, just send it through. Don't go anywhere just yet, though. We've got our gold nuggets coming up.
Now it's time for us to go mining for our gold nugget property tip of the day.
My gold nugget was that Dave said something that really stuck in my earlobes, and that was that with property investors that have at least a couple of properties, they at least have one hole in their lending, and it's so easy to do. And property investors get focused on the next hotspot and how they're going to increase their yield by value add renos or granny flats, or gosh, did I miss Perth, or is Darwin too risky, or what's happening in Ballarat, everyone's talking about it. It's so easy to forget those little things, but these are the costly little mistakes that can compound over time and possibly put you in a situation where that next property that you're coveting and that all your mind and will is bent on is impossible because you haven't got that structure right. So it just says to me, and I say this every time Dave does a deep dive on his area of expertise, it's bloody complicated. You need someone who knows what they're doing, and if you don't, you're going to cost yourself.
I've got a little gold nugget. This is one key reason why I think a strategic mortgage broker is so valuable, because if you've got a banking relationship, you're not going to have a conversation with the bank about when it's time to refinance, are you? I mean, they've got a mandate to keep you there, and I think it's really vital to make sure that you're aware of the value of independent advice.
I went to a restaurant the other night, and the person I was with said, should I get the linguine? And the waitress sort of looked over her shoulder and she went, no. He's like, oh, really? And it was the first time I'd ever seen that before. And she said, oh, look, it's just like, don't tell them I said this, but it's a bit bland. Like, and I've never seen that happen before.
No.
And he didn't get the linguine, and I think he dodged a bullet there. But you're not going to have that same conversation with the bank. I mean, they have more cameras, right? They're going to be watching their staff to go, I think it's time to move over to XYZ because we're just not competitive anymore. Like, that's a really good point, Cate.
Yeah, they'll be doing their darndest to keep you with them and tell them why they're great, and you shouldn't leave forever.
And you've shared in the past, Dave, that you as a broker have a responsibility to the client to act in their best interest. That bank doesn't. They have a responsibility to the shareholder, which wants you to stay there at your expense.
100%. They don't have a legal obligation of a best interest duty, a bid that mortgage brokers do, nor do they have all the compliance requirements that brokers do and the need to disclose everything to their customers. So yeah, it's very different. If I had to leave you with one thing, it's this: refinancing isn't about chasing the lowest rate. It's about making sure lending actually works for you. And because your circumstances change and the marketplace is constantly changing, you need to review your mortgage strategy and set up, I would say, every 2 to 3 years with your strategic mortgage broker. And that goes to some of the things Mike said, goes to what Cate said as well in her Gold Nuggets. We see this all the time. People either don't refinance when they should, or they do it for the wrong reasons, and it ends up costing them more in the long run because they totally stuff up their structure and their strategy as part of the process, because not everyone focuses on the strategy and structure. And when I say everyone, I'm meaning brokers and lenders. The reality is this stuff gets complicated pretty quickly once you factor in cost, structure, offsets, and your long-term strategy. It's not something you want to be guessing your way through or flying blind and missing out on some gold that you don't know exists because you are working with the wrong people. So if you're even thinking about refinancing, get someone to run the numbers properly and sense check your strategy. And look, if you want help with that, you're always very welcome to reach out to my team at propertyplanning.com.au to review your situation, which we do at no cost because we are paid via the lender. So overall, we really hope this has been helpful for Greg and for our thousands of listeners. And as I said at the start, I'm a little surprised I hadn't thought to cover this earlier than what episode are we in? 358 today.
Greg's got you back.
9.
Well, thanks, Greg. 359. Yeah. Better late than never.
Yeah, no, it's been a ripper. And that's the benefit of the listener questions. Sometimes they unearth something that we haven't done a deep dive on. So keep them coming, everyone.
Keep them coming. Cheers, guys.
Good to see you.
Later. You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.